Hello and welcome to Skeptic Generation. I'm Eric Murphy. Or hello and welcome to the show.
Wow. You cave under pressure.
I did. Today's a little extra bit. Okay, can we try that again?
Sure. Let's
Hi,
go.
welcome to the show. I'm Eric Murphy.
I'm Vila Bianca.
This is Skeptic Generation, and we need to talk.
Welcome to Skeptic Generation. This is Skeptic Generation.
Yeah, well, I got a little bit of pressure because I'm excited. Hey, everybody. So this is a really special week for us because I have my family visiting. I have my mom and dad who came to visit and got to meet you.
Yeah.
And it's been really wonderful showing them, and we're showing them how the show is going. They're sitting right over here. Actually, Mom, did you want to say hi?
Sure.
Hey, come say hi.
All right, you're rolled over the...
Oh, jeez. Hold on.
Wow.
Technical difficulty.
There we
It
go.
wouldn't be a show of SkepGen without them.
Now, come on in.
Go. Hello, everybody. I'm Rebecca.
This is my baby.
Aw, I love you,
This
Mom.
is my other baby.
Love you, Mom. And we can do that because it's our show.
Oh my gosh.
So.
That made me so happy.
Yeah, me too. Oh, that's good. Oh, okay. Yeah, so a little nervous, but it's been a really fun week of getting to spend some time together. It's been several years since COVID that we've gotten to see each other. I did mess something up, and I want to apologize up front that I did not update for March the outro.
Okay.
And that is something we promise patrons to do, and that is on me. That is my fault. And so after this episode wraps, I'm going to go in and make sure that everyone that has become a patron is thanked in the credits the way that they should be. So from the bottom of my heart, I apologize.
If you joined in February, you will be reflected starting next week.
Absolutely. Sorry about that, you guys. We do have a couple of announcements before we get into the show.
Yeah.
So let's dive into those announcements. We have, speaking of Patreon, a patron hangout every other month. We sit down with a bunch of patrons at a specific level and just have time to hang out and talk and all of that. That's going to be happening this week on March 22nd. At 4 p.m. Central. We had to kind of split the difference because we don't want it to be too late for our overseas patrons, but we don't want it to be so early that people who live in the United States aren't going to be able to make it and due to work or whatever scheduling issues. So we're hoping that 4 p.m. is going to be a good time. We hope to see you there. If you want to become a patron, either to hang out with us, talk to us, or if you just want to get an ad-free version of the podcast and this show, you can go to patreon.com/skepticgeneration. That's patreon.com/skepticgeneration. We put that towards making this show happen. It takes a lot to make it happen, but we're doing our best. I think I'm just going to go with that. We usually do a lot more, but I'm now kind of blanking because I'm excited because my mom just said hi. Is there anything else before we...
Parents watching.
I know.
Imagine we used to do this in front of a very large group of strangers.
Well, we're still doing it in front of a large group of strangers.
In the same room.
I know.
Oh my goodness.
But
so no specific rant today. I just wasn't angry enough at anything this week.
It's been a good week.
It's been a good week. So we are going to jump right into calls. That's going to work better anyway because what has been happening is we've been having to end the show before we get to talk to everybody because so many people are calling in.
Yeah.
So if you would like to call in and talk with us, sooner is better than later because a lot of people call in later and then we have to pick and choose. So you can call the show at 585-526-8774 or
585-LaMurph.
or you can use your computer and do tiny.cc/callSG. And we would be happy to talk to you about skepticism, about your deeply held beliefs, about anything and anything that has to do with philosophy or science or religion. We love it all.
Absolutely. And I'm loving it, the live chat. Mom, you're gonna have to check out the live chat for the show. Everyone's saying hi to you. All right, to start off, Chaos called. Let's talk to Chaos in the UK.
All right. Welcome, Chaos.
Chaos, hi.
Hi, guys.
Hey, what did you want to talk about today? Or actually, no, I'm sorry. We've started reading it. It says you want to talk about arguments for and against anti-natalism.
Yeah. So if there's someone in the audience who isn't familiar with that, it is the idea that for a given fetus, it is, depending on the exact argument, either more likely or certain that it would be better to terminate a given fetus for an abortion to occur than it to be born.
I mean, I feel like that's definitely one direction you could take it, but I don't know if that would be considered the definition of anti-natalism, at least not to my understanding.
Yeah, the
Okay.
the way that it was described to me was that it was described to me as the view that having a child is unethical, and the unethical piece of it would be that that child would be able to experience suffering, and there's the view that suffering, the suffering had isn't worth that life, and so we're kind of creating something that's going to experience suffering that never had the choice about whether or not it was going to opt into that.
Right.
That's kind of how that was explained.
Yeah.
I think it was. I think I was trying to get at that. I just phrased it weirdly, in that children shouldn't be born effectively.
Right.
Effectively, the outcome is children shouldn't be born.
Yeah, I think that's a more general and accurate term. So arguments for and against. What are your thoughts?
So my thoughts are that while I find there to be interesting arguments for, I think the argument against would be because when you're getting into ethics, obviously you've got various different like utilitarianism and consequentialism and things.
Right.
I think that there are some interesting and potentially even compelling cases for children not being had in certain circumstances, or for individual circumstances. Sorry. I think at a systemic level, if it was broadly applied, it wouldn't function.
No, in fact, it would only function to further make, I think our most vulnerable populations would be the one who would suffer way more, and it would not be great.
Yeah, I mean, as with most philosophical concepts, there's the practical implications and then the impractical ones if you take it to the extreme. Skepticism is one example of that, right? You can be a skeptic and find value in skepticism, but if you look strictly at the philosophical discipline and take it to its extreme in this pure form, it becomes untenable, just like any other one. So I think that's the same with anti-natalism. I think in certain circumstances, facing human extinction, facing mounting environmental concerns or world wars, all of these things might make some people, hesitant to bring more life into the world, and that is a valid viewpoint for them. But I think once we make broad scale decrees about what is and is not correct,
yeah, ethical. I kind of find it's for me it's kind of a paradox, because I find that someone who would put the time into thinking about the well-being of a child that they're going to have, and who would say, I would want to raise a child in the best possible world that I can, and if I need to wait or whatever the case is, so that I can make sure that the child I'm raising is going to have the best shot possible and what I want to give them. That's the kind of person I want to be a parent, and so I'm frustrated that the people who would give that consideration are the ones who aren't having kids. Obviously that's only in circumstances when that would be, taken into account. But yeah, it's kind of frustrating. The people who care that much, I would really want to see them in that role, but
yeah, chaos. One thing that I do think is worth bringing up is that I feel like this issue has become kind of cartoonishly stereotyped to the point where a lot of people just kind of poo-poo it, like, that's stupid. Who would agree with that? And in certain circumstances, if you're presenting it as no one should ever have kids ever, then yeah, that's not tenable, right? That's not going to happen. That's not something we should be pushing for. But being conscious of the fact that you are essentially bringing a life into the world against, like, without consent, and therefore inflicting harm in some circumstances upon a new entity that otherwise wouldn't have had to deal with it and had no say in the matter. If you take that to its conclusion, you come across, anti-natalism. So
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that I think that at some point in the future, if we ever get to the point where we're ready to explore space and you have a generation ship where generations are going to be born on the ship and die on the ship, I think I would take a pretty strong anti-natalist approach there, because I think that that would be really, really awful to do to living people. Guess what? You were born in a tin tube and you're going to die in the same tin tube.
tell that to
That's-
Naomi Wildman, though.
Oh, it's...
Chaos, what are your thoughts here?
So my thoughts are that, I personally probably don't want to have kids on kind of anti-natalist grounds. So my genetics are pretty poor. So for me, having a kid in the biological sense is something that I know would in fact cause a significant amount of harm,
Right.
as compared to an alternate option like
adopt.
adopting an LGBTQ kid or something.
Sure.
Something where I know I can cause a positive effect instead of a negative one. And I think that level of addressing it is good, but when it's looked at the scale of, for any given consideration of should a child be born here, if you're looking at it and going from, for argument's sake, a utilitarian standpoint, is this person's life likely to have more suffering than not?
Yeah, and there's a...
Then
Sorry, go ahead.
I think that if you look at it through that lens, that can be a good way to look at it. But I think that the other thing about that is that rather than looking at the circumstances as they are and going, is there a reasonable adjustment that could be made that would permit for this child to be born without there being incredible suffering or whatever, then I think that is something that gets overlooked quite often in these conversations, because otherwise you get a lot of people who do take anti-natalist positions saying, in general, LGBT plus people shouldn't have kids because their kids will face discrimination, and that can cause more harm than good.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of where I do want to draw a line very firmly. I feel that my family history health-wise has not been the best either, and so I would have to think long and hard before passing all of that on. But as always, we want to focus on autonomy here, right? And that should be the goal. So the second that we say, because of your genetics, you should not have children for anybody other than ourselves based on our own moral stance, we get into some really sticky situations very fast.
That is 1 degree away from eugenics.
It is essentially eugenics.
Yeah.
So
well, there's the justification that moves.
Right.
Yeah,
So
really awful.
Definitely I agree with you, and on a personal level, I empathize very much with the reasoning there. But as always, we cannot tell other people what to do. And if any of these philosophical concepts spill into actually taking action against others, we get into like a Gattaca situation, which is not great.
But pragmatically, I think we do have a solution. I think that if someone is wondering about whether or not they're wanting, to raise a child, and they're wondering about whether or not they want to biologically have that child, hey, there are a lot of kids who need families.
Exactly.
I think that, quickly just moving over into those people who are already born, the number of kids who would love to be raised by a loving parent, sufficiently pragmatically for me solves that, until such time that that's not the issue. But yeah, that's kind of where I got to tell you, Chaos, You got to call in and talk about anti-natalism while my parents are visiting and watching. It's real weird. It's real weird. I feel awkward.
This is fair. I didn't know that would be happening, otherwise I would have picked a different one from my list of topics
No.
to discuss with you guys.
That's okay. There's another caller in the queue who wants to talk about this kind of thing as well. So it seems to be that is going to be the day.
The parenting episode.
But we do have others. But Chaos, thank you so much for calling. It's always fun talking to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's been good to chat with you guys. I think if I was to make one last remark, it would pretty much just be that I think another interesting result of applying anti-natalism like globally would effectively mean that only rich people have kids, which is a weird thing to think about.
Oh, yeah. And there's definitely been enough sci-fi around that to make that.
There is one more thing really quick. I saw that in the live chat, we did have an anti-natalist who said that their position is motivated not by any of the things that we brought up, but by the idea that humanity is damaging this planet and that by having less kids, we would be leaving a lower carbon footprint. And that's the position that I saw outlined in the live chat. So because I'm not an anti-natalist, because Chaos, it doesn't seem like you're strictly an anti-natalist, I do want to make sure that we're representing the view as clearly as possible, because we don't ever want to straw man a position, especially that person. No. You know, those people aren't in the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a local anti-natalist, if you will. I would apply it to myself, but I don't think it can be applied more broadly.
Yeah. I think that's a good policy for most philosophical concepts, frankly. But yeah, thank you for calling in, Chaos.
Thank you.
All right, cheers. See you guys.
I feel like we got to workshop local anti-natalist a little bit, though. It just gives me
anybody
this...
in my general vicinity should not have children.
Yeah. Like I imagine somebody standing in front of a pediatrician with a sign, pediatrician's office with a sign.
Who would do that? Who would stand in front of a doctor's office and picket? That
would be an argument I would pay to see, to be honest.
Oh my goodness.
It looks like we had a couple of people drop. There might have been an issue with our lines. We do have someone on the line that we're going to take, but look, if you're watching and you wanted to have a conversation with us, if you're a religious caller, today is your day. We always say call in early so we can give you the time that your topics deserve. If you want to call in, 585-526-8774. If you're a theist caller, you will get priority in the queue. And because we had a bunch of stuff drop off, it's really windy out. That might have been the issue, but we could use the calls.
I'm sorry. In my head, I just pictured them blowing away. It's windy out. That's why we lost callers. They blew away.
In the meantime, it looks like we have someone in the screening room, but in the meantime, we'll take David in North Carolina. David wants to talk about the cycle of war in history and the evolution of parenting. It really is that episode. David, you're live with Eric and V.
Hey, Eric, AB, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Doing well. So what did you want to talk about with us? What about it?
Well, so I had the pleasure of being a student of Dr. David Beizell, and he in psychohistory, and he brought us through two major psychosocial theories. Well, I shouldn't say two major. They're often presented in tandem, like in pairs. One of them being the cycle of war, loosely, in which a group of people projects a bunch of unrealistic expectations onto a leader who promises to achieve them, and then to avoid their anger finds an enemy inside or outside to be the projective container for that, so we can have a war on whatever. And that's a destructive cycle, versus the evolution of parenting through phases that largely have been supported historically, but exactly what they mean. I mean, we moved through.
So David, can I ask a clarifying question here?
Sure.
I'm having trouble connecting this to skepticism or any of the topics we usually kind of discuss and have through each other. So what I'm kind of looking for is how can we relate to this and talk about this together in a meaningful way.
So the evolution of parenting becomes very relevant as you see historically it coming up on modern times as the idea of helping mode parenting. The only model that, by our current standards, produces well-adjusted and rational people is only like 150, 200 years old. Historically, it's only become the predominant model since the 80s.
Okay.
It's about the future. And this cycle of war versus the evolving maturity of our society.
V, are you getting this? How can we interact with
so
this?
I'm hearing you say that because we've seen an increase in kind of rational, skeptical parenting since the 80s, you're hoping that is going to decrease the amount of war that we see moving forward?
Well, it has. The correlation of the 33% of parents who even try to parent better or raise their kids at a more caring standard, a more conscientious standard than they were raised, that 33% is chugging us towards less and less violent insanity through history. I guess the question is, will we nuke ourselves before we reach a more stable point?
Yeah. So my instinct there is to say that if we're talking 80s and onwards, I don't know if we have quite enough data yet, because the people who were parenting well, those 33% that you've said, and I would love to see stats on that at some point. Those 33%. The kids are just now coming into ages where they would be running for office or, beginning to make an impact on the world. So unfortunately, right now, we are still being moved as societies by people who were not benefiting from this type of parenting, allegedly.
Yeah. And the live chat is reflecting that. They're like, we've had a whole lot of war, a whole lot of conflict and strife since then. And honestly, David, I do not feel qualified or that I have the context to be able to speak about this in any meaningful way. I'm just completely outside of my ability, like out of anything that I know, I'd just be talking out of my butt, and I really don't want to do that.
Well, I think that it's an interesting question, and that certainly is a hope that the focus on better kinds of parenting and moving away from a system where you are a good parent if your kid survives to you are a good parent if your kid thrives and is a good member of society and contributes and all of that, which we are in a position now where we can do that. It would be interesting to see how in the future that would impact things like war and violence, but I don't think we're at a point where we can see that yet.
Well, and I'd be really curious. I'd be really curious about how we would count for other mitigating factors, how we would isolate that from, a million other things. But
we're not trying to isolate, we're just trying to find positive correlation. And that's been done, especially with the transition between parenting mode and our previous mode, which was socializing, characterized by punitive discipline, which is all like tucking away parental aggression into appropriate models. Now it's about disciplining a child into being productive and acceptable in society, and the punishment is towards that end. Well, helping mode says when a child can talk, you shouldn't be spanking them anymore.
Yeah, there's definitely the phrase like if the kid is old enough to be reasoned with and understand why they're being hit, don't hit them because you can reason with them. And if they're not old enough to understand that, then why are you hitting them? They're not going to understand why. So yeah, there's definitely a valid piece of advice there. But David, frankly, I think that this is an interesting topic, but we're not nearly
not qualified.
Deep enough in it to provide any more meaningful
but hopefully, you can get some interaction in the comments or on our Discord. I'm sure
Yeah,
that there are people who are much more well-read in this kind of stuff than us who could engage with that in a way that would be useful for you, because I don't want to get into the habit of talking out of my butt on things. You all deserve better. But
We all deserve better than Eric's butt.
Anyway, David, thank you for calling.
Thanks for calling, David.
Thanks.
All right. Oh, Relic in Texas called, and Robert in Mass. Oh, both of them are really good. Who do we want to take first? I like them both.
Yeah, let's talk with Robert first, just
Yes.
because Robert's been trying to get on and I think has been having a little connectivity problem. So
Yeah. Robert in Massachusetts.
I love that they fixed me.
Hi. So it says here that given the right conditions, can something like a cup of tea make itself in nature or in the universe? You want to talk about ontology. Yep. And you wanted to call in last week, but you didn't get the opportunity to get through to us. So we're glad you called back. Hi, Robert.
Hi, how are you, Eric? Hi, V. Glad to talk to you guys again. Last time I was talking to you guys was on Talk Even.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, glad you you found us and followed us. And you can just hit OK. So just to clarify, when you say that a cup of tea making itself, the context around that, because not everybody understands where that comes from, and that comes from arguing whether or not a universe could create itself. And whether or not, so if you were to say, can a cup of tea make itself? Well, the circumstances would need to be extraordinary. That cup of tea, you'd need a Rube Goldberg machine, or you'd need to be in a very, very specific place with very specific circumstances for that to happen. And the argument is that it would be far more likely that a creator created the universe than something creating itself, like a cup of tea. And that's kind of how this is presented. So as we talk about this, if people are going, why the hell are they talking about tea? That's why. It's working with an analogy and figuring out where the limits of that analogy apply to the ontological argument for the existence of God.
And unfortunately, that's about as much tea as you're going to get on this channel.
What? Yep, we are not a drama channel. But Robert, I want to give you the opportunity to give more. I just wanted to give the baseline for people who are following along.
Right. And you actually kind of hit the nail on the head, Eric, because the backstory behind this very question is I'm in a Facebook group where it's about quote unquote exposing atheism. Ooh. And so one question that I was presented with that I found very interesting, obviously I'm on the atheist side of that argument. They're trying to argue that, God is the prime creator of everything, and a universe can't create itself, yada, yada, yada. And exactly as you hit the nail on the head. And so one little argument I was having with someone who was very interesting was, describe how a cup of tea can make itself then. If a cup of tea can't make itself given the right circumstances, then that's evidence that there's a creator outside of it. And I'm like, not necessarily, but I actually want to ask, V and Eric about this. This guy's actually got my brain tickled.
Yeah.
Do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. I think, honestly, I love that you dove in right away with the caveat that we are talking about two fundamentally different kinds of things, right? A cup of tea is very different from a universe. And in the same way that we would say, well, your piano cannot make coffee in any situation, therefore there is no such thing as a coffee maker. That doesn't follow. Right. So it definitely, that is the crux of that problem. But more broadly, I don't know. I'm annoyed at this because this becomes a situation where it's a shifting of the burden of proof, and not in a way where it's an honest question for you. Unless you can prove this random hypothetical wrong, then my suggestion is correct. And even if a cup of tea in any circumstance could never make itself, that does not mean that the only other option is a God, let alone a specific God. So there's a false dichotomy part here as well that we should address.
There's so much. Also baked into that is the intent of making tea, that the universe, the beginning of the universe, if there was a beginning to the universe, happened with some kind of intent. And so the idea that there was a thinker who wanted to put this into place is kind of implicit in the way that question is asked. How do you make a cup of tea? Or how can a cup of tea make itself? When you're talking about things that don't have agency, you don't say, how did that water evaporate itself?
Right.
How did that rock roll itself down a hill? How did that planet propel itself around the sun? It's giving agency to things when there is no agency to be had. But in each of those examples that I gave, you are seeing natural forces at work. And we do have evidence for natural forces in the universe. We have evidence for seeing, rocks roll down hills. We've seen and have studied water evaporating. And we understand the mechanics by which planets revolve around other celestial bodies. And because of that, there's no need for a God. If you want to kind of wax poetic with that group, you can bring up the story of Napoleon and Laplace, right? And how Laplace had written this work about the movement of celestial bodies, and Napoleon had read it and wanted to rib him. And mind you, I don't know if this is actually something that happened, but calls Laplace in and says, this is a fantastic work, but I have to ask you, Laplace, where is God? You're talking about movements of the planets and all of that, but you're not including how God is included in making it happen. So where is God? To which Laplace retorts, I see no need of that hypothesis, and gets all huffy. And the idea that natural forces are enough. And so the question is, do you need more than that? Evidence shows that to this point, natural forces have been sufficient. The idea that that not that would be the case needs evidence, and that's not evidence that's being provided.
One of our mods said, tea is just herb water. That happens all the time. All it takes is the leaf falling into a small pool. So technically, I guess tea can create itself or make itself.
Oh my gosh, the number of people in the comments who are saying define cup. There are so many pieces to it, and I absolutely love it.
Well, there's also the last piece that I would want to point out, which is a lot of people who would argue for a creationist viewpoint, especially young Earth creationists, which I don't know if that person was, they pretend that everything is created, right? So if you're asked, what is a created thing versus an uncreated thing, how would we determine whether or not it's created? They say, well, everything is created, right? And so they don't have that category, at least not on the surface. But when you dive into examples like this, they very clearly know what things are created, like a cup of tea, versus what things are naturally occurring, the evaporation of the water from that cup of tea, right? And so there's this surface level denial that they even see that difference. But the only reason that this analogy that they throw is they think it's compelling at all is because they are creating, it's a category error that for a lot of people, maybe not this person, is intentional. And in and of itself admits that there are categories of natural and created.
Well, I mean, we had a caller last week, and I wouldn't say that they didn't see the difference. They just classified it as that which is created by man and that which is created by God.
Well,
and so
even that, okay, we'll grant that. What's created by man, what's created by God? Two different categories. A cup of tea, created by man. So what is created by God cannot fall into that category. This allegory is not helpful.
Find a better one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Robert, what are your thoughts here?
Just to give some more context, the person who I was talking with was Muslim, so I'm assuming it's Abrahamic, therefore young recreations. I don't know, but yes, but I actually do love the idea of, bringing up natural forces and how, the universe in such a way, especially with orbitals and whatnot, that God isn't necessarily needed. And even I'll try to retort questions like that. Well, like the dam analogy, if you see a dam and you see a dam blocking a river, did that dam naturally form itself from built up debris, or did a beaver make it? It's like, what evidence around it do you see? Do you see teeth marks? Do you see just is it sloppy put together? Is it constrained? Is there poop and fur everywhere? One of my favorite analogies from Matt Dillahunty. But my only problem is that if I were to argue something like that with a particular person, and they'll just say, oh well, God created those self-sufficient forces, so he doesn't need to do the extra work or something. I don't know. It's they'll always bring it back that extra mile, to God. It's like God created all of this, and you can't prove me wrong.
Right. Well, then we just have a problem with unfalsifiability, right? If they're going to grant you
Exactly.
that everything that is observable doesn't need a God because God made it that way, they're just removing a whole bunch of potential evidence from their bucket and admitting that they don't have an answer for it. So, yes,
Right.
It's frustrating, but really what they are saying when they admit that, if they go there, what they're saying is, I don't have evidence, and therefore I'm going to revert to a claim that cannot be falsified. And then you win.
But we have to make sure that we are holding ourselves to a higher standard. We want to hold ourselves to the standard that we see in our interlocutor. Speaking of, you casually mentioned something, and I want to sharpen you as a skeptic. Not all people who believe Abrahamic faiths are young Earth creationists. Just because it says it, just because it says it in the book doesn't mean that people don't interpret it differently. And there are plenty of Christians, Muslims who believe in evolution or believe that we live in an old universe. It totally depends on what their traditions and theological teachings say about it. Because I've seen plenty of churches that say this is allegory or this is just a story for some other reason. But if we try and say, oh well, you have to be a young Earth creationist if you believe in the Christian God or the Muslim God, creates a straw man that you're going to find yourself in a bad position on. Better to listen to them, and if they say, hey, I believe, but I also don't think that we have a young Earth, trying to pin that on them is not going to work out well. It's just not great. This is speaking from experience. Because
the question. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was like, well, the questioning didn't really go there. There was no reason to bring up that question. It was just mostly about who created what, not so much of the timing. So luckily, I dodged that bullet. But yeah, you're right. I do want to build up a habit of basically asking. What are your views on creation? The group that I'm in is very staunch Quranic, everything and from the Old Testament and this is set in stone. But yeah, you're right. Even then, I do think I should get in the habit. Pre-clarifying questions. It's do you believe that there's evolution with this creation? Do you what's your specific personal perspective in this?
And, and hopefully you've seen on this show that when that kind of when that kind of consideration is given, or if somebody's talking to us and is not giving us that same amount of consideration, I'll say, hey, I'm affording you the same amount of consideration. I'd really appreciate if you gave that back in return. It's powerful. And that is usually a really great way to get people to stop and go, okay, I need to be a little more compassionate. And you find you have better conversations. So, anyway, I'm not meaning to, smack you down about it, but just wanting to sharpen you as a skeptic and as somebody who's going to...
No, I appreciate it. Oh, and before I go, I would like to recommend a debate for you guys, if I may.
Sure.
Okay, last week, you guys had a call where you guys are talking about like the arc of progress, where I actually posted a comment on that video, which one of you guys liked. I want to see you guys have a more fleshed out debate about that, because I see really good points from both your sides.
Yeah, we got a lot of attention on that one and a lot of comments saying, I agree with V. So that might be an interesting conversation to have. I would like to hear more about your thoughts on that anyway. So
okay. Yeah, if I call back next week, I'm going to ask about that question. Like, definitely, I'll want my take on that.
Absolutely, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
All right,
Robert. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Take care. That was nice.
Yeah.
Anytime we can get a little.
Kept calling in. I know he was having some connectivity issues, but
I agree. And I mean, we like getting esoteric. We like getting, really into the gritty details, because I don't know. I feel like I spent so much of my life hearing things that sounded really complex, and my eyes would glaze over, and then I would just assume that I was too dumb to understand. But smarter people obviously get it.
Obviously, yeah.
It's a habit that I needed to learn to break. And the more we can talk about it and make it more comfortable to engage with, the less people can feel intimidated by that, because that was an effective way of shutting me up and shutting me down, is just this like, well, obviously it sounds very complex. These people are talking about it with authority, and I just don't get it, so I'm not smart enough to engage.
Right. And hey, if you are engaging with theists and they give you an argument that, rubs you the wrong way or feels off, but you're not quite sure why, that is a great reason to call the show. I love those kinds of conversations where we can pick something apart and be like, all right, what is wrong with this? Where is this going off of the rails? And can we describe it succinctly enough that it can help you next time when you have that conversation? And
at that time when it happens, if you have the opportunity to look at someone that you disagree with in the face and go, I have no idea about that. I want to look into that and learn more about it so that I can come back and engage with you more in this conversation. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge, and it's something that if you get the opportunity to do, you are going to see, people reciprocate that. If you take the time and say, I don't know, but I'm going to look into this, and you come back, it's just fantastic.
Yeah. All right. I'm really excited to talk to Relic in Texas.
I agree, and we still need a couple more callers. It's still early on in the show. If you want to call 585-526-8774, we'd love to hear from you, or tiny.cc/callSG. Let's talk to Relic in Texas.
All right. Relic.
Relic, it says that today you want to talk about the problem with evangelism. Is that right?
Yes, sir, it is. Hi, Eric and V. I'm glad to be talking to y'all again.
Absolutely.
I want to apologize because I didn't congratulate you two on your engagement.
Well, thank you. That is okay. It's been a couple minutes.
I know. Last time I saw you on Talk Heathen, y'all weren't an item, and now you are. And so I was like, oh my God, I'm going back through all these backlogs on Skeptic Generation. And I'm like, they got engaged.
Yes, we did.
In fact, my mom and dad flew down and got to meet V this last week. It's been a really, really nice week.
Yes, it's been amazing.
Yeah, but we live together. We're renting a home together. We're doing the show together out of that home, and it's really good. So thank you very much. I love that, we do have people who are still religious, who are rooting for us, who are wishing us the best. Relic, the fact that, we may not agree on everything, it makes me extra happy to see that you want to see us well. I feel like that's the kind of engagement I want to see more of. So I'm really touched by that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's actually part of the reason I'm trying to call in.
Yeah.
Something I've noticed, and you could take this as just my experience. I'm sure, Eric, because you read the comments, you might have seen a couple of my spats with some of the community.
Possibly? I'm not sure. I think my mental health protects me in that I will read it and then I will promptly forget about it soon after. So I don't ruminate too much. What I'm really looking for mostly is ways to improve or places where I fucked up. So I need to make sure I apologize next episode. But
Yeah, I get that.
Clue us in. What are your conversations about?
yeah.
Okay, so 90% of the time, and I think that you would all agree, is that 99% of the time we agree on what's important. And there's that 10%, which is, on my behalf, I believe in spirits.
Okay.
That's immediately cause for people to go, oh, he needs mental help. And so yes, I've seen some past calls on bro-atheism and all of these things, and I realize this isn't just something that happens with me. This is something that genuinely happens with communities on both sides of the fence. Whether you're a theist call-in show, you have the same issue with anybody who's atheist. You just sweep them under the rug. They're unwell. They don't believe what we believe. There must be something wrong with them, or they must be deeply unhappy.
Yeah, who hurt you? Who hurt you? You must be angry at your earthly father, and so you're taking that out on your heavenly father. That kind of, yeah.
Exactly.
What caused you to hate God so much you turned away from the faith?
Yeah. And I don't know, I'm not going to throw dirt at any other talk shows, but I want you to realize how advancing your show is and how important your show actually is. Because you treat theists with respect to the same amount that they deserve to be treated, as long as they're being respectful and it's a two-way conversation. But you treat them with respect, and that's important.
Well,
and I can't stress that enough.
That's really touching. Thank you.
Yeah, honestly, the only way we're going to make any kind of progress at this point, I mean, here's the thing. There's always that point in a community's growth where they are small enough that they really have to yell and be loud in order to be acknowledged, right? And it is a part of the process, regardless of who we're talking about. But we are actually at a point, at least in the United States, where atheism is no longer necessarily an underdog outside of maybe certain funding for certain politicians and government stuff. In the day-to-day life, as far as the population goes, we're quickly coming up on a sizable chunk. And so at this point, my take is that we need to stop being loud for the sake of being loud and have conversations with people, because that's the only way that we're going to learn how to coexist as two groups who have different ideas about how the world works. As long as we agree on 99% of things, and you're doing your thing and it's not impacting me, and I'm doing my thing and it's not impacting you, then we're good, man.
Yeah, I mean, if there are kind of two different standards, though. One is, can we be allies? And that's exactly where you're at.
Yeah.
The other is the pedantic, getting really, really into the weeds, being consistent in your epistemology, and what are our axioms? How are we, approaching the world? And those arguments, a lot of the time, is navel gazing, and it's my favorite kind of navel gazing. I love it, and I will take up that navel gazing with anyone who wants to, because that is my favorite thing. But yeah, you're right. If we can be allies, fantastic. But I also don't want to lose track of where the most fun is for me, and that is the esoteric stuff. I want to challenge you, because if you have a belief about the world and I don't, one of us is wrong, and I really don't want to be wrong. And I also don't want you to be wrong. And so I get excited about it, and that's where I feel that's where we go from there. But yeah, if we're gonna just be shutting people down, or talking about their beliefs about the world as if they're mental health, number one, I think that trivializes mental health, and that does a disservice to neurodivergent communities. It's not fair. It's not okay. But also, it fundamentally misunderstands how something like faith tradition and religion can kind of ingratiate themselves into a society, and how it can shape the way that people, epistemically approach the world. If your epistemology, if your toolbox is that much different than mine, it's no wonder that you come to different conclusions. That doesn't mean that I'm going to assume there's something wrong or something, that is broken about you.
Right.
Because that's just, it's just so condescending. So yeah, no, I gotta agree. And just one last piece that I gotta just drive in there, and that is, a lot of people have dealt with things like gaslighting in their lives. People being manipulated by people they trust and believing non-true things, and for people who have come out of abusive relationships or abusive situations where things like gaslighting happen, you didn't wind up in that situation because there was something wrong with you. You get trained. Right. You get trained in that, and often, tools like that are used, and they're not used necessarily intentionally or maliciously, but passively. And you shouldn't be blaming a person for being, trained that way. The best you can do, though, is expose them to other thoughts, engage them, and hopefully maybe cultivate a passion for truth and for these kinds of topics. So anyway, I'm getting way off topic, but that's important to me.
Speaking of way off topic, I'm really curious, because maybe we just phrased this differently in the screening notes, but Relic, you called in specifically about the problem with evangelism, and I'm really curious how that ties into this.
Oh yeah, geez. Good call, V. No,
it's okay.
Today. I didn't.
And I feel like everything you've said completely ties into it. And here's my point. And once again, I'm not going to name shows, but everybody under the sun who is into skeptic communities and cares about these topics knows who I'm talking about. So I'm going to leave it perfectly vague. There are communities that breed this, and I'm talking about the evangelistic take on it. There are call-in shows to where it is pretty much, if you watch close enough, it is doctrine that if someone starts making too much sense, get them off the air, shut them down, push them away.
So I want to be more charitable than that. I want to be.
I understand that.
I want to be more charitable.
Are we surprised?
And yeah.
Yeah.
V, do you want to go? Because you know where I'm going to go, and I'll be happy to say that afterward. But.
Yeah. So I think that on the one hand, you are absolutely correct in that a lot of the people who have come out of a Christian background were raised evangelical, at least within the last, few decades. And if that's the case, then a lot of the mindset of how to talk to people about these issues might not have gone away with the God belief, right? And I know I was guilty of that for the first few years of deconverting as well.
No, yeah, they're habits.
Right, where it's like, this is how you engage with people, right? You tell them that they're wrong, and you tell them what the real truth is. And it in some situations that is called for, absolutely. But it is worth taking that step back and saying, all right, if I just changed there is no God to there is a God, would I have a problem with how this person was, quote unquote, evangelizing? Right? Mm-hmm. Is this a conversation, or is this, right, pushing someone on the street with a megaphone and some cue cards? And I don't think that's helpful anymore, as I said. So I think a good practice for a lot of people is to take a step back and say, all right, I know how to evangelize. I'm good at it. I was trained how to do that. I'm really good at that. If I wanted to, I could. That's a skill set that was, banged into me. But is that the best option for communication right now based on what I want to embody, which is skepticism and, what is embodied by the street epistemology concept and this idea of having a conversation, and evangelism simply does not allow for that. And so I'm going to tone that back. I'll pull it out when I need it, but I'm going to tone it back until I deem that it's an appropriate use of a tool.
And there are appropriate uses for it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, poo-poo that. One of the things, Relic, do you believe in life after death?
Yeah.
You do. I don't. And so when I stopped believing, I needed to grieve twice. I grieved when that person died, and then I grieved again when I realized that I was never going to see them again. It hurt. It hurt really, really bad. It was really damaging. And being in the atheist community, being in the atheist community, I've talked to a lot of people who maybe didn't say their goodbyes the way they wish they could, because they were like, well, I'm going to see them in heaven. I'll get to see that, I'll get to repair that relationship then. And for someone who doesn't believe in a heaven, that opportunity is lost entirely.
Yeah.
And so to me, I see something very, very damaging, given what I just explained. I'm sure you could see why I would see it as damaging.
Of course.
And if I was talking about it and I were to say, one ought not to just accept that there's a heaven, I feel like it's selling you on something like saying, I'm going to give you $1 million at the end of the week. Oh, it sounds great until the end of the week comes. Did you get it? Oh, well, you're never going to find out. Well, crap. I feel like there's damage there, but when I talk about it, it comes off as evangelism. And I got to tell you, I feel like I want to live in a world where people treat this world like the fragile, fleeting
miracle that it really is.
In a secular way, yeah. The fact that we're alive on this planet at all is the closest thing to a miracle than I can imagine.
Honestly, that made me so happy. That's the line that Jeff Goldblum had when he was on Hot Ones the other week. he just
really
went for it. Yeah. I highly recommend watching that interview specifically, because he had a beautiful way of saying that exact thing from a skeptical, secular standpoint, which was really cool to hear. But yeah, I think you're spot on as well. We live in a culture that, evangelism is a type of rhetoric. And a lot of the time when we get excited about a thing or, come down hard on a thing, it does, the word people reach for is evangelizing, and not everything is. Some things definitely are, and you don't have to be a Christian to evangelize. That is not something that I would say. But at the same time, there are some times that people get really aggressive and excited and strong-willed about a topic. Yeah,
in this case, the existence of a heaven. I'm really, really strong. I have strong opinions about the damage that I think it does.
But oh my gosh, this is a topic for a much larger conversation too, because if we're saying, well, I just think that the things that I see as actually harmful deserve that kind of treatment, well, then that's exactly what Christians are thinking, because it's what they see as really harmful that deserve that type of treatment, and we would call that evangelizing. So it's an interesting definition to use, but the basic point that you're making, Relic, that we need to be more compassionate in how we listen to people. We need to be willing to prioritize conversations and be challenged if a rote answer that we are giving because other people have given it is being challenged effectively. That's exciting.
Yeah,
that should be
we go back
something
to the
we
drawing board.
look for, not something that we
and you summarized it perfectly.
Yeah, and also I just kind of want to push back. There was a comment in the live chat that got me. Somebody said that that dogma is required for evangelism, and that's not the way that we're using that word. The way that we're using the definition of evangelism could include things like CrossFit. And we can argue about whether or not CrossFit has dogma, but when you're very excited about something or you're very passionate about something and you want to spread the word and you feel like you ought to, because you're either preventing damage or spreading well-being, then I would include that as a kind of evangelism.
Yeah.
If that helps for people in the chat
Right.
who are scratching their heads.
Okay, so first of all, like I said, I completely agree with V's summary of what I was trying to speak about. And Eric, I completely get that loss of the afterlife and that second layer of loss that's just hitting me. I'm like, wow, there's a lot of these people that I thought I was going to get to see again, that I'd be able to make things right. Because I'm not going to lie, when I was an atheist, I have a lot of people that I probably ended on poor terms with that I would do anything to get moments back with.
Yeah.
And I get the solidarity that comes with hanging out with other individuals or with like-minded individuals who see the great lie, because it could be seen as a great lie, that like it's something that's meant to be a comfort drug. I do believe in it because of firsthand experiences on my end, but I can understand from anybody's secular perspective why they would believe what they believe, and they're justified in it. And I don't want to take that pain from anybody because it's a very real pain, and no one really has the answer. The thing I want to drive home is that with the evangelism itself, with pushing these ideas, you should never push an idea at the no matter what the cost label. You know what I mean? Without that, I'm going to push this. If someone says anything that's otherwise, they're clearly being dishonest. But if I had someone accuse me of having some sort of secret agenda to stir up the atheist community, which was probably the most hilarious conversation I've ever had in my life, where it would just be a back and forth shotgun battle of like, you have an agenda. What's my agenda? I don't know, but you have one.
Well, and in that case, everybody does. The one thing that I do want to, I would love to get into an entire conversation around the concept of when do we pull back from an idea because it is no longer practical or would result in harm. Because I think that that's a really interesting topic that we actually covered a little bit with Chaos earlier in the show when they called in about anti-natalism. But I do think that that is a huge topic for another day. In the meantime, though, Relic, bottom line, you are a good interlocutor as far as I have seen. I enjoy talking with you. We don't agree on everything, but that's why we have these conversations, right? If we agreed on everything, there would be nothing to talk about.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Relic, thank you for calling in.
Thank y'all for having me, as usual.
Take care. Bye. So there's something I kind of want to talk about really quick before we get into the next call.
Absolutely. Wolfos, down the line.
Okay. So there's this idea that if we don't challenge someone consistently, that we're not doing them any favors. And I've heard that pretty regularly. And I kind of want to give that a little bit of context. So I remember the very first time I sat down with Dean Meadows. Dean wanted to set himself apart from a lot of other apologists, because Dean's an apologist, who were really, really pessimistic, negative, made a lot of poor assumptions about atheists, made a lot of judgment calls. You know, all atheists really do believe in their heart. They just hate God, you know, or there's no way that we could, you know, work together towards a common good.
Right.
And so the first time we sat and talked, especially in front of a camera, we were eager to find those common ground pieces, not because of, you know, we did it so that we could counteract the negativity we've seen. And people sometimes look at that and think, well, you're not doing any favors, you're not actually challenging their ideas. No, we're laying a groundwork that we can build from there. And after that, we do continue to challenge each other's ideas. But you do need to take into consideration the context of where you are. If you think that you should challenge every single idea every single time, that is a privileged life that not all of us get. So that's fantastic that you have that privilege. I wish we all did. But until we all do, the expectation that we all must doesn't work.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of There are a lot of social politics involved in that as well, right? You brought up the idea of privilege there, and not to get all on my woke high horse or whatever, but the idea that there is one way to confront somebody, and that is aggressively and take no nonsense, is not available to a large portion of people because of the stigma around doing so while being a woman, or while being black, or while
being Mexican.
Right. So there are also things to consider there. If I am more gentle in the way that I engage with somebody, a lot of it is just because I don't see a need to be angry unless, something provokes me. But also, it's because I've been socialized to engage in that way for my own safety, and because if I get loud and aggressive, I get made into a meme and, shared on right-wing Twitter as, look at these, woke babies who are scared and crying about everything. So there's other things to consider as well. If you don't like the way one person confronts other people, that's fine. You do you, 100%. We need that. Whatever it is, we need that. But at the same time, be considerate and don't make snap judgments about other people.
Yeah, I've been spoken over so that people could white knight for Latino issues. Like, stop it. Stop it. But moving forward, I do want to challenge that finding common ground, or especially pointing out places where you're finding that there isn't common ground, and developing those is beneficial. So, kiss our asses. Next.
Speaking of not being aggressive, kiss our butts.
Honestly, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and
no.
We have so many different things, so many different callers, so many different strategies and viewpoints that we're trying to roll with the flow, and there is a time and a place, and you better believe that if we have those callers again, we are going to want to challenge them. But finding where there are issues like that and kind of resolving them is important too.
Yeah. Someone says you don't need to be aggressive if you have the facts. Ugh, I hate that line of reasoning so much. I get where you're coming from, but the idea that aggression means you are not backed up by evidence is also not accurate, because you can both be emotional about the fact that those facts are being ignored or contradicted and have the facts on your side. Let's dive into Wolfos' call, because otherwise we're just gonna
I'm just gonna fall into this hole. Why do you care about whether or not people agree with you? Because I want to be an effective communicator.
Oh, call in, ask these questions. We want to have these conversations.
Because if I don't get better at this and find better ways to communicate, it's for nothing. Anyway, Wolfos calls in again this week. Wolfos in Texas. You're live with Eric and V. It says in the notes you want to talk about the problem with evangelicals doing evangelical things in public spaces.
I like that evangelical things is in quotation marks. I'm so curious to know what these are.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. I guess I said it wrong to the call screener, but inside public buildings is more of a idea that I was thinking. Inside public businesses, where the person there is trapped there, behind a counter, behind a desk, like a secretary or anything, a doctor's office, and they don't see the boundary that they're crossing, even when they're told that they're crossing that boundary. Like, I don't mind people giving their opinion right then and there. We discuss it for a second and they move on with their day. But I was trapped just last night for about 2.5 hours in a discussion, and we weren't getting anywhere within the first about 15 minutes, and I could tell. And I told him that right away. And then I'm still, by contract of the place I work at, trapped behind that desk or behind that counter until that person moves on.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I just don't know where the boundary should really be laid in our current society. Right now, we just let religion be out there because freedom of speech is cool.
And it is. Just if you're recognizing that somebody's talking at you and you bring up, hey, you're talking at me, and they, yeah, okay. I don't know what to say. I mean, if it's the service industry, I guess it depends on how much bullshit you're willing to put up with. Because you do got to put up with bullshit to some degree in service industry. If it's not service industry, you can tell them to shove it. But it just totally depends. I found that there are a couple of ways that I'll respond to things that generally get them to recognize and shut up. One of them is if somebody says, "I'll pray for you," I'll try and, or something like that, right? Or "God bless you." What I'll do is I'll try and take it as gently as I can, and I'll look at them and I say, even though I don't specifically believe that, I understand that that's a wish for goodwill coming from you, and that what you are trying to express by it is positive, and I want to thank you for that kindness in your own way. I want you to know that I see that. And that usually gets them to go, "Oh crap, I'm being the asshole, aren't I?" And that'll stop things. But you'd be surprised that just that little bit of recognition helps a lot.
Yeah, and last night I had to turn into the asshole, and it just had to. I am in customer service. I work at a gas station. I'm open all night, but I looked him square in the eyes and said, "Then are we done here?" And I had just waited for a response because I had nothing else I could say. I mean, I'm trapped here, and obviously, he said, I asked him how his day was, and he said, "Bless." I was like, "Awesome." He said, "Jesus is great." I said, Cool. And then he went about his time until he got to the counter, and then he explained to me why Jesus was cool, and I explained to him why I don't believe in the Bible. And then it went from there, and he kept on referencing the Bible, and I'm like, yeah, that doesn't mean anything to me, so are we done here?
Yeah.
That sounds exhausting.
Yeah. I think this is a perfect example of picking your battles, Is the frustration of gritting your teeth worth, is it more frustrating or less frustrating than the conversation that you're inviting? That there's it's a really shitty but you're kind of having to pick one of them.
You just be like, "You know what? You've convinced me. I'm a Christian now. Bye."
I tried that, and then I got invited to like 12 different services.
Oh no!
Oh, you probably did better than what I did to that poor old lady when V and I went to Pennsylvania.
Oh my goodness! I still can't believe you.
Yeah, I don't want you to think that I'm this paragon of virtue here. V and I went to Pennsylvania at one point, and there's this little old lady that walks up to us and just says, "Can I pray with you too?" And I looked at her and I just started laughing my ass off, just loud. And I pointed at her and laughed until she walked away uncomfortable. That was not a very great way. That was not a great way for me to engage. And I would recommend other people find better ways to do that. But I would be a hypocrite if I said that I haven't been that way before as well. We do our best, right?
Yeah, well, there is an agreement as to, personal space and what is considered polite. And if they are going to invade that space, then there could be an argument made that, you have the right to also put being polite and respectful to the side and meet them where they're at, which is in this kind of wild west of who can be louder. It doesn't do very much, but hopefully it does kind of remove this obligation from you to be polite and forthcoming to somebody who isn't doing that themselves. The only thing I would bring up here as well, though, and this comes from a place of probably close to home. Thinking about it, I am pretty sure that my dad was on some level on spectrum, and religion and Jesus and these kinds of conversations were his hyperfixation. And he would dive into these conversations with no, we could be talking about something else and he could have this thought or have come up from, where he was doing research and be like, I need to share this, and just go on and on and on. And it's very important to, while we are pointing out the offensiveness of doing that intentionally as a method of, pummeling someone with your belief system because you think you're saving their souls, it's important that we not fall into the hole of making fun of people for having a hyperfixation and not picking up on social cues, which
That's
can
true.
happen in religion or with any other topic. So
Yeah, you can't always assume the motivation.
right. I
That's fair.
always want to make sure that that's something we take into consideration while having these conversations. But Wolfos, that does sound exhausting, especially if you're at work and you're kind of stuck behind a counter. Guys, don't do this. Like, this is not an appropriate place to evangelize to somebody while they're at work.
You're taking hostages is what you're doing. It's not great. Also, if you think that evangelizing to people in prison is good,
That is-
you are also taking hostages. It's not good.
Or the homeless population. Like,
Yeah, forcing them to sit through a prayer before you give them food it's real bad.
I have so many feelings about that, but Wolfos, thank you for calling in and
Thank you.
sharing your experience and letting us dive into this topic.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, guys. You have a wonderful day.
You too. Take care. So I saw a response when I was saying that how I respond to somebody saying, I'll pray for you, is I'll say, oh, well, I think I understand how you mean that. And thank you for the well wishes. People in the comments are saying, well, people say I'll pray for you in a condescending way. Give them the same response. I think I understand that. Thank you. I think I understand that as you wishing me well in your way, and I want you to know I see you and I appreciate that. What are they going to do? No, I meant to be a condescending asshole to you. Like, all you're doing is forcing them to have to explain the racist joke they made. What are those things, right? You're making them explain the fact that they were being an asshole. Or, just give them the benefit of the doubt.
Kill
honestly.
them with kindness.
Kill them with kindness, yeah. All right, let's talk to Maddie in New York.
All right.
Maddie
let's
has
call.
frustrations with the use of community with online and social media platforms. Maddie, you're live with Eric and V.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, folks. Hesitated giving in a call and stuff, but I appreciate being able to chat with you all a bit about this today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I actually happened upon your show just this last week by seeing V, I think, and Drew.
Hey.
Your conversation about the YouTube algorithm showed me that video, and then I started following up on all of that, and I ended up binge watching Midnight Mass,
Yes.
and whew, what a show!
So good.
Yeah, and
Welcome
I think
to our
I could
little
get
slice of the
derailed by
internet.
talking about that.
Yeah.
But I think something I've been kind of wrestling with, as the description there said, that I wanted to focus my just to open up the conversation with folks like yourselves that are, you're starting to build a platform, and and people colloquially have started using the term community for, the people that would be down in the chat, or otherwise parasocial connection with you all.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm in a place in my own therapeutic journey where I'm realizing that, I guess I would self-own that I'm of the Oregon Trail generation, right on the cusp of
Nice. Yep.
Millennial and Generation X. I actually just turned 40 last year, which is just really weird to kind of say. And I'm finding myself bereft of intimate connections and friendships. Intimate meaning close friends that if I were sick would be down to come bring me, a can of soup or something if I reached out to them, or, my partner that I currently live with, they fell and shattered their elbow 2 years ago, and I ended up being their caregiver for most of that year. And that's a way that we kind of grew closer and stuff, but they didn't really have anyone else to reach out to. And I'm was just curious to see, like, if there's any sort of, like, cognitive dissonance that might be happening around the use of community.
I love this topic, Maddie. Thank you for calling in with it. I feel like Eric and I have probably different opinions on this as well, and I think that we're going to probably dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, just know, Maddie, you started this.
No, I think it's, on the one hand, I think that there is a big danger in calling your viewers or people that you interact with in a parasocial way community, friends, your network, your like, it's dangerous.
Family.
Right. Family. Oh my goodness. No, please. I love y'all, but we are not family, right? We're not friends in that way. And to assume that we are is to open ourselves up on either end to potential abuse of power, right? Those power dynamics are real, even with somebody with a small number of subscribers or somebody with more followers on Twitter or what have you. So there's definitely room for caution there, 100%. On the other hand, and I know that Eric will have many things to say about this as well, I do find that there is a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to press against that term when it is used in certain situations, because someone might not feel like a part of that community, right? And so if I were to say part of the atheist community, and someone who has not been involved in any kind of more insular group of atheists hears that and thinks, what community? I'm not part of a community. Right. There is no community. Or maybe there's triggers happening with that word. I know that when I went to a Christian college, community was a big word that they used all the time to mean church. While being cool, right? And so I think there are a whole bunch of reasons that people pull away from that word, when in certain situations, it does make sense to use. If you are all in it together for a reason, it doesn't have to be the same reason, doesn't have to be the same end goal, but if everybody in a space is brought together for a shared worldview or mindset or goal or
hobby,
identity or
purpose.
Hobby, right? Purpose. That's a great, perfect. Yes, purpose. That's much more concise. Then yes, in some situations, that is calling yourselves a community gives you a sense of belonging, which a lot of people online don't have. And it also gives you a sense of power, right? Because the more people are in a community, the more influential that community can be externally. It's one of the reasons why during the gay rights movement, they decided we're not just going to be the gay rights movement, we're going to join with the lesbian rights movement, and we're going to be all inclusive to build a larger community that had lobbying power, that had voting power, right? And they might not all be in it for the same reason or know the same people or find friends in that community even. But there are benefits.
But there was solidarity and connectedness.
I love that word, solidarity
between all the members.
So that's my 2 cents on that subject.
Maddie, before I jump in, I want to give you the opportunity to respond to V.
What are your thoughts there?
Oh, I mean, I think I'm also like connecting it with my own like frustrations. More so, I think the dissonance of the use of the word love and all the different contexts that we use the word love, you know, from familial or like friendships, the poly community, you know, polyamory or non-monogamous community wants to open up and use it in different ways, or with intimate partners and stuff, or even, you know, again, parasocial relationships, influencers saying, well, I love all of you all.
Right.
You know, the English sometimes does run out of utility with some of these concepts. And I think maybe listening to you kind of unpack that and point out some of the ways the community is used in other contexts to build like solidarity and belonging. You know, I think I'll I'll walk away with this conversation able to kind of like, okay, well, let me parse where community is used, look at the context that it's in, and adjust my relationship or my reactions to seeing that word.
I love that. That is a beautiful takeaway, and I'm happy that that's kind of helpful, because the context is everything, and you are absolutely right. English is a very poor language when it comes to synonyms and different words for different things. We kind of lump a bunch of
Describing
stuff.
relationships, interpersonal relationships, I think the English had a problem with that.
Wasn't priority
Being
number one for
colonizers
sure.
and stuff, right?
Yeah. Eric, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would just supplement a little bit.
Yeah.
So I love, Maddie, the way that you described that, making sure that you are limiting what you are receiving from that community, the kind of support, make sure that it matches what that community is. For example, I recently started playing Dead by Daylight because I wanted to play with a friend, and I found a Discord and a group that was really fun, yada, yada, yada. Anytime I want to vent about something that happened in that video game, I go there because I know that there are people who are empathetic, who know what I'm talking about, and who care. And that's great. If they told me how to vote, that would be no. That'd be a big no. If they had advice about, a new cleanse that I should try, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm limiting to that. There is something unique.
Boundaries.
Exactly. And there is something unique about boundaries that we establish with the communities that are built around shows and personalities. When you develop these parasocial relationships, I've had a number of new creators who I've talked to and tried to help a bit along the way behind the scenes to give them advice. And one conversation that I hate having, but know needs to be had, is eventually a creator will call me and say, hey, Eric, I'm having trouble with the fact that there are people who are fans who want to get together and have these great conversations, but they're relying on me to be the mediator between their arguments.
Right.
There's now conflict, and they're needing me to step in. And I don't know, I'm spending more time trying to manage my fans who are disagreeing with each other than make content. And I have to tell them something I absolutely hate telling them, but I tell them, they get to have a community. You don't. You don't get to be a part of the community that's being built in a parasocial way around you.
Yeah.
What you provide for them means something different to them. But when you speak up, there is a power imbalance. You speak with an authority that no one else in that group has. And because of that, you need to recognize and limit the interaction to what you want that to be. But you don't get to pretend like someone who's been a fan for 10 years doesn't view you differently. It's unfortunate. It hurts. But at the same time, I had to learn the hard way that when I've tried to get involved in community that was built around things that I was doing, it did more harm than good. It was not okay. And I absolutely hate it. But yeah, if you create a platform and that platform grows enough, there's going to be a community. The best you can do is enable and push, and create those spaces. We created, Facebook and Discord and things like that. We interact in a limited way, but we can't let ourselves be a part of that so much that, because then weird things happen. Weird, terrible things happen. If I reach out to somebody who offers to help and, they're a fan of the show, and they say, oh, well, I'm great in this is my profession. You need help? I'd be happy to help you. Well, guess what? You're getting free labor, and that person is going to feel like they need to now work for you for free.
Yeah.
And I have seen a lot of creators that are no longer creators anymore that have developed communities that resented them because they're like, I put in 200 unpaid hours for this person and they never, did anything, or I did all of this.
Reciprocity or others
And there's no way that we can reciprocate with tens of thousands of people who want to do things like that. And it sucks. It hurts. I wish that we could, but we can't. And so we need to draw those lines. And so we can talk about the Dead by Daylight community. We can talk about the local community that's able to bring you, soup when you're feeling bad. We can talk about all of those different places, right? I got really into Magic the Gathering. There was a Magic the Gathering community that I was a part of, damn it. But specifically when it comes
Been there,
to,
done that.
Oh, yeah? Oh, the money sink is awful.
Oh, yeah.
That is another topic. That is a rant that I will go on for hours. I have boxes. Anyway, sorry. Specifically when it comes to shows, when it comes to these kinds.
My cousin owns a comic shop if you need to have a place to unload them.
Okay, you were going to sound like a dealer for a second. I was going to be like, get thee behind me, Satan.
Nice.
But when it specifically comes to shows and when it specifically comes to the way that we can interact with the communities that are built around us, we need to recognize and be very, very careful with the way that we interact, because we want to encourage like-minded people to build relationships with each other. The sad thing is,
there's a responsibility of intentional.
You absolutely got it.
Yeah.
You need to recognize and be responsible. And the responsible thing often is to let go. You know, it doesn't mean that, you don't grow it, but what it means is you cannot interact in the same way everyone else can. It means you can't date in that pool.
Right.
That means that you can't depend on best friends in that pool. That means that when it comes, don't borrow money from that pool. That
free labor is always.
Yeah, it's not. It is a tough road to walk, but it's one that you need to.
You know, I think I've heard other content creators kind of mention or allude to ideas of where they had to kind of come into this place of realizing that they needed to set some boundaries as far as what kind of support they might be looking for in a certain space. I'm thinking specifically of Natalie Wynn of ContraPoint.
Oh.
She's discussed before throughout her early years of transition and stuff, being quite hurt by the broader trans community, and having to find some ways to create a better balance there. And it's been insightful, but it also is hard. I think one thing to maybe ask you all before close out. I'm curious, how do you all then find support and a more intimate, supportive community while you're also, in the place of shepherding this other parasocial community, if you will?
Yeah, that's a good question. We find it, I find it at work. We find it with other content creators that are around the same level of, clout,
or experience.
So we don't, obviously there's going to be, considerations there as well. But yeah, there are very many kinds of community, and you can build some and not participate in them. Others you can participate in, but you aren't part of the building. There are some very small communities, groups of friends, where you build and participate at the same time, and everybody has the same kind of, power in that group. So it really does come down to, like you said, Maddie, parsing it and thinking about the context and thinking what kind of community is being advocated for right now, what's being referenced, and am I comfortable in this community? Because that really is what it comes down to. We want to make sure that with this community, we've just built the room. We're not hanging out in the room being like, hey guys, isn't this a great room? Come be in the room with us. It's, hey, we're building a room and we want to make it beautiful, and we want to make it safe, and we want to make it a place that people want to go and hang out with each other. And that's our role in this particular community.
It's the limit of what we can responsibly do, unfortunately.
Yeah, we do have to wrap up.
Yeah, and that actually.
We're going to have to run,
so
Maddie, but please do call back if you want to continue or have other questions. You seem like an insightful person, and we'd love to talk to you again.
Definitely. Thank you, Maddie.
Okay, thank you so much, V.
Bye.
Y'all take care.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It hurts. It hurts in here. And there are so many people who've reached out, and I'm a graphic designer, I'd love to help. And we're just like, we're on a slow path. It would be great to reach out, but you deserve to be paid for your work. And I know that you want to help, but how can I make sure that you're not being taken advantage of. And I still, bounce with that when it comes to our volunteers. Our volunteers are screening calls. They are keeping our social media channels safe, including Discord and Facebook. And if it wasn't for them, those wouldn't be the safe, wonderful, growing places that they are. And we aren't making enough to pay them. And they're like, we're happy to be a part of this community, and I wish that we could give them more. For our volunteers, we love you guys, and we're so grateful for you. And I don't ever want to take advantage of that kindness. Anyway, sorry.
We've got an after show to get to.
That's true. We do. We're going to be hopping into the Discord. So if you have not joined us on Discord, check in the description, and we are going to be going there after this. But in the meantime, let's read some super chats. Zhang sent $2 and says, "Hi, Mrs. Eric's mom."
Henry M sent $5 and says, "Great show. Keep up the good work."
Nice. Jacob McKenzie sent $5 and says, "Great show as usual. Not surprised. Thank you for the kind words a few weeks ago. P.S. Can I buy these badass glasses?"
You can't buy mine, although that would be a fun thing to like.
Ooh, create an
autograph.
affiliate link.
Create an affiliate link with Zlol.
Yes.
You can buy them yourself for very cheap. They're not expensive.
No.
Henshin sent $4.99, says, "Thanks, you two are awesome."
Hi, Zhang sent another $2 and says, "Jesus did CrossFit and it was very harmful." It was poor form. Those kipping pull-ups are just not.
Oh my God.
Anyway.
CrossFit. Simply Haven sent $50.
Wow.
Thank you. And says, "Always glad to see your smiling faces on Sunday morning."
Yay. Ricky Brincat sent $20 and says, "Having issue with supporting the Brandon Sanderson Kickstarter. After finding out he's Mormon and I'm part of the LGBTQIA plus community, any thoughts? Am I being too critical or pedantic?"
Ooh.
Ricky, I have been a fan of the Cosmere and Sanderson for many, many years. I backed their Kickstarter for the Mistborn board game that they did years ago. And what I find is I've found at least that Brandon Sanderson draws a line. The things that he writes about are not Mormon. He creates worlds, and I haven't heard him use his platform to espouse bigoted ideology. I could be wrong, and I could just be ignorant. But if somebody's private religion is X and they're not utilizing the platform that they've built, like the big one that Brandon Sanderson has to espouse bigotry, I don't see why I wouldn't support him. If I had the money, I would absolutely get in on that Kickstarter. It is crazy expensive, but I'm really, really glad to see that it's going to that, because I absolutely love the Cosmere, and I cannot wait to someday get to read those books.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the difference between, say, Chick-fil-A and some more local shops around here that are also, a little bit problematic because the owners have maybe anti-choice views or something like that. One of those organizations is actively using the money that they make to go overseas and make life harder for gay people. The other, just has some beliefs that I disagree with. I think they're harmful, but they're not advocating for anything or using the money in any way. And you don't necessarily have to only spend your money how you want, but nobody's going to judge you for supporting somebody if you disagree with certain things about them. Yeah. As long as they're not actively advocating harm, I think you're fine.
And yeah, I am an atheist. I have been an atheist on the internet for a long time. I know Brandon Sanderson is Mormon. I would fangirl so hard if I got to meet Brandon Sanderson. Oh my gosh. Anyway.
All right, Zhang, final one, $5, thank you, says, "English exists on an island. Norse Vikings. Yo, let's invade that shit. Norse French to Norse. Hold my beer." That's funny.
Oh, man. So we are going to be hopping over to the Discord. We'd love to talk to you.
Yeah.
Anything else before we close out? I know we ran long today.
We did, but I think we're good.
All right, then. Until next time. We're glad we had this talk.